John is in, hour later than normal, due to the Eagles having a press conference today. Minor press conference. Paul Worrilow, the new linebacker, is in town. John was up there at the NovaCare Complex. We'll see if he found out anything interesting about him. Also, some other NFL news and notes, including a big trade yesterday after we got off the air, and other NFL doings around the league. And John is back with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. John, how are you, pal?
Doing well.
By the way, I in my possession here a pale blue Dr. J Afroed caricature T-shirt with your name on it.
There you go. Thanks, buddy. My childhood hero.
I did not know that. You texted me that last night.
My favorite player growing up was Julius Erving.
The doctor.
Yeah, which is, I'm hardly alone in that one.
No.
Of people around my age.
You were at the press conference today. We talked a lot about Paul Worrilow yesterday. Anything compelling or interesting that you found out about Paul, who, we think is in here that could cause a little bit of a logjam at that position?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of starts in this league under his belt. I think he's a significant upgrade as a backup linebacker and a core 4 special teams guy. He'll be on all the coverage units. And I think if you look at what happened last year and the fact after Jordan Hicks went down, you had that struggle. Even though the third linebacker on this team doesn't play that much, the Eagles clearly weren't happy with Joe Walker. Were forced to go on the street and bring in a 32-year-old guy like Donnell Ellerbe. So if you think about it from that standpoint, this is pretty significant depth at middle linebacker behind a guy, Jordan Hicks, who's got, let's be honest, he's had a lot of injury issues dating all the way back to his college days at Texas. So I think it was one of those smart second phase of free agency signings that this team has kind of been known for, at least in the short run since Joe Douglas has been here. This is another one that makes a lot of sense, and they were able to get a deal again because he's a Delaware kid. He grew up an Eagles fan, and he wanted to play here, and basically said he took less money to come here, and had the option last year when he signed with Detroit. The Eagles had interest in him then, but got a pretty significant deal from the line, so he had to make the better financial decision. But this time he said he wanted to be here. He wanted to come back. He's always wanted to play in Philadelphia, and he's here.
It also obviously displays a focus on special teams, and that they want to continue to improve in that area. Bringing in guys last year like Brian Brayman, they brought him in late in the year. Guys like they drafted Mac Hollins, who that was a special feature of his. He should add to that bunch too.
Yeah, I think they were a little disappointed. It's hard to be disappointed when you win the Super Bowl, but I think if there was one aspect of the team that concerned Doug Peterson, it was special teams, because I think he and Dave's in this league. So some of it was due to injuries, but I think they understand they needed to sort of rotate some guys who excel on special teams. I talked about it at the beginning of free agency. You got to bring in some players that can do it and can do it well, and they were able to do that with not only Paul Worrilow, but also Corey Nelson, the other linebacker they signed. They're both core 4 special teams coverage players that are used to doing that, and not only used to it, they expect to be in that role, and they're not going to sort of turn their nose up and say I should be starting or doing things like that. They're going to embrace the role.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, covers the Eagles and the NFL. The 32 teams have their dates out. First day for Philly is April the 16th. What exactly goes down April 16th?
That's just phase one. There's no on-field work. That's just strength and conditioning and some of the injured players doing rehab, and that's obviously collectively bargained. So that part of it isn't any of the on-field work. That'll happen later when the OTAs start. And then you have obviously the biggest part of the off season is the mandatory mini camp, and you have this has been one of the issues since the 2011 CBA. It's the fact that you have this push back and forth, and that a lot of coaches around this league don't believe they have enough on-field time in the off season, and players fought very hard to curtail that because they want lives off the field. So it's one of those give and take that's going to be interesting in collective bargaining the next time. But April 16th is strictly strength and conditioning and getting back in the gym and starting to get ready.
Yeah, dates are OTAs, May 22nd, 23rd, 24th, May 29th, 31st, June 1, 4, 5, 7, 8, and then mandatory minicamp for 3 days, 12, 13, 14 for the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's almost here, and we know the draft is on the way. You wrote about a potential draft prospect. Now, we talked the other day about Orlando Brown's, a guy that the Phillies front office, or the Eagles front office knows pretty well. But you're not the only guy that I've heard or seen talk about Van Der Esch, a linebacker. Who's he, and a guy that you think the Philadelphia Eagles would be interested in, guy from Boise?
Yeah, I think they're very interested in him, and that's the problem, though. There's a lot of teams interested, and his stock is starting to go up. And Ken Flajole, their linebackers coach, was out at Boise State for his pro day. They have significant interest in this player, and this is, I think, one of the few players, because I think as we look at the landscape, unless they can get it done in other ways by trading players, again, I think the Eagles want to gain draft picks, and if they're not able to do that by trading players, well, then I think the most likely scenario is they're going to trade down from 32 out of the first round and into the second round and pick up an extra pick or two that way. But this is a kid that I think if he's there and he falls to 32, they would not trade out no matter what. I think this is one of the few people they would actually sort of sprint to the podium and take. Mm-hmm. They have that much interest in him. Problem is, I don't think there's any way he gets to 32. I think his ceiling would be Pittsburgh, which I believe is at 28. Remember, they have to replace Ryan Shazier with that horrible injury, probably never going to play again. And that's a player who Van Der Esch is the Steelers like him a lot, and there's 6 teams really in that range from sort of 20 to 30 that is going to take a look at him, and he's going to be in that sort of range to go. So I think the Eagles love him, but I don't think he's going to be there.
A little breaking news for Philly. They signed tight end Richard Rodgers from Green Bay. He's a guy that, and a lot of people thought he was going to be a good pass-catching guy with them, with Rodgers as your quarterback. I don't know that he ever really developed into the guy they thought, but the Eagles, we had talked a lot, John, about they need a guy to replace Burton and potentially Selleck, so Rodgers maybe fits the mold, 1-year deal.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, and I think earlier in the day that might be a response to Troy Nicholas coming off the board, signed with the Patriots. He's that sort of a big blocking tight end that I thought would have made a ton of sense for the Eagles. Toy Lolo was another one who signed with the Lions. So these guys were starting to come off the board. And Richard Rodgers is another sort of blocking tight end that I think is a need for this team. And for those hoping against hope, that pretty much closes the book on Brent Selleck. But that was already closed. There was no way the Eagles were going to bring him back. And this is a player they need, the type of player, and I think they're also going to add bodies at that position in the draft as well, because they need more than one. But you kind of knew they were going to bring in a veteran. I would have hoped it would have been Nicholas after Toilolo went off the board. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get either of those two players.
Yeah, 8 touchdowns a couple of years ago. So a guy who, can catch the ball, be a part of the pass game. You mentioned him as a pass blocking guy too. So, we'll see how he ends up fitting in with this team.
Everybody gets 8 touchdowns on Aaron Rodgers.
8 touchdowns in 2015, caught 58 balls for 510 yards. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be. He's going to make this team. There's no question about that. He's an NFL player. He's not going to catch 58 balls here. But I do think he's going to be a rotational player. He's going to be involved in the offense. And I think it's we just talked about it with Worrilow. This is another one. This is another one that makes sense for this team and their needs. And that's been the best part, I think, of the Joe Douglas sort of regime in the personnel department. Not everything is going to work, but when you see everything make sense and you understand the moves and the signings, that tells you it's a good direction. And I think everything the Eagles have done basically for the past 2 years from a personnel standpoint and free agency has made sense, and that's half the battle.
A lot of NFL news today. Let's get into some. Former Eagle Jordan Matthews running the circuit in Nashville, where he went to school. He's been in Arizona, around the league. What do you think about Jordan Matthews and where he could end up?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's been going around. He's visited 4 teams really over the past couple of weeks, and he did go. Obviously, went to school at Vanderbilt. So he's very familiar with Nashville. He's a good player, but I think everyone saw him here and realized there's just not a lot of speed for an NFL receiver. So from that standpoint, he's
still not limited. A bad number 3 like slot guy.
No, he's not. But I think when you start looking about where Jordan thinks of himself as a player, I think because, remember, when he was putting up big numbers, and I would call him a high-volume guy with the Eagles, it was because the Eagles were struggling at that position. They wanted to get better, and that's where you had the loggerheads, where he expected to be paid like a high-level number 2 receiver. I wouldn't say number 1, but – and the Eagles didn't think of him that way. And truth be told, the Eagles were correct. Yeah. They made the right decision. And Nelson Aguilar had a higher ceiling. They felt that. More athleticism. It worked out very well for Philadelphia. And Jordan's in a spot where he's coming off an injury-plagued season. From all reports I get, he wants about $5 million a year. And I think he's having difficult getting that number. We'll see ultimately if he gets it. I think for him, it's going to be better to take a 1-year deal, prove himself, even if it's for $3 million, whatever. And from there, you pick a good scenario. He visited the Patriots. If the Patriots have interest, then you can hook up with Tom Brady. He also visited the Packers, same thing. If you can hook up with Aaron Rodgers. We just talked about it with Richard Rodgers. If you go to Green Bay and you get to play, your numbers are going to be good. And that might get you the big contract you're looking for.
John McMullen, NFL News and Notes. Let's look at some more. Brandin Cooks traded yesterday. New England said, one and done for you. He goes to L.A. A lot of people love what the Rams are doing. It looks like Cooks is going to get an extension. What's that look like? It looks like he's going to sign a contract year. What does that say? Plan to sign contract year to an extension prior to the season. Okay, I'm sorry.
He's playing under his 5th-year option now.
Right.
Big spike is his rookie option, so he goes up to over $8 million a year. That was the Patriots' issue. So the Patriots really got tremendous value. They got him for 1 year when he was still very cost-effective on his rookie contract. and then spun them off and were able. Remember, they gave up the 32nd pick, and now they get the 23rd pick. So it's a typical smart move from the Patriots, but I think it's also a smart move from the Rams standpoint, even though maybe on paper it doesn't look like they got the value. But the reality is the Rams believe they're a significant Super Bowl contender. They brought in Aqib Talib and Marcus Peters and Ndamukong Suh. They have tremendous talent, and they're in a position where they have the young quarterback on the rookie contract, similar to the Eagles.
Right.
So that's when you have that short window to build up your roster and make a significant run. So I applaud the Rams for what they're doing as well. And so I like it from both teams' standpoint. If you look at it and they're two distinct situations, I think it makes sense from both sides.
Yeah, and it looks like Goff and Cooks had been working out in the offseason together. They get paired up now. So this Rams team's putting together an interesting little story out there, John.
Yeah, I mean, they're the offseason. I've declared them the offseason winners. But we all know how that can not work out. They brought in, as I mentioned, a ton of big names, and Cooks is just the latest. Now, some of them, Peters, Talib, and Sue particularly, Cooks has never really had any off-the-field issues or any issues with coaching staffs, even though he's been traded twice. By all accounts, he's a good teammate. He's a hard worker. He's had tremendous production. The other guys have had certain issues, and we all know them, but they're all really, really talented players. So if they can figure out a way to handle that locker room, yeah, I mean, they might be the most talented team in football. If you just look at the number of really high-level players they can throw at you, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and the one big difference is a lot of times the team that wins the offseason is a team that typically was not very good, and they go out of their way to try to do things a la Washington in the past. This is a team that won the division, made the playoffs, and is winning the offseason, which means, hey, maybe they really want to take that next colossal step from being a one-and-doner in the playoffs to making that Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, and I think they're right. Their window is open, as I mentioned, with Jared Goff. Eventually, you're going to have to pay him a big contract. You have a little bit of time before you have to do that, so you have the ability to bring in guys. Now, I don't know how long it's going to last. They were able to get Sue on a one-year deal. If he continues to play at a high level, they're probably not going to be able to bring him back. And Brandin Cooks, they got to sign them both. They're only there for 1 year, and they're both going to get significant money. Peters and Talib, I think, have 2 years left, so they have a little more wiggle room there. But this is clearly a team that is building to win a championship in Super Bowl 53, and I think it's fair to say they have an opportunity to do that. Right now, I would say they're in that conversation. I think the biggest problem with all the NFC teams, this includes the Eagles, the Rams, the Vikings, the Saints, the Packers, that's a tough conference. And things are a lot easier for the Patriots on the other side when you got to deal with the Steelers and maybe the Jaguars. The NFC is just a lot deeper than the AFC.
John, RG3's back, 1-year deal with Baltimore to be the backup quarterback there. I mean, does he stick? Do they just bring him in because they're intrigued? Have you heard that, hey, this guy has turned the corner, he's improved? I was kind of, an eyebrow-raising sign there.
Well, I mean, yeah, because he was out of the league. And obviously, if you think about, I think he's the last guy to win a football game for the Cleveland Browns. And you remember when he got hurt, I think it was week 1 here against the Eagles. He was actually playing pretty well, but that's been one of the issues. Obviously, the major injury kind of turned things in a negative direction in the playoffs for RG3. As a backup quarterback, he's got talent. I mean, it doesn't hurt to take a look. So from that standpoint, it's fine, and we'll see how he does in training camp. I don't think there's any guarantee that this guy's going to be a top-tier backup or potentially a starter down the line. But hey, we're in March. It's April now, but it's worth taking a flyer on him because he does have significant talent. You saw that going back to his rookie season before the injuries, and you even saw flashes of it in Cleveland.
John McMullen at JF McMullen. Give him a follow on Twitter, of course, for all the NFL news and notes this offseason. It looks like former Eagle Benny Logan is visiting Tennessee. We'll see when
Benny and Jordan Matthews in Tennessee.
There you go. You could have a pair of former
ex-Eagles convention.
That's right. A couple former Eagles heading down there. We'll get more into the draft starting next week here on the Sports Bash, as, of course, the Eagles pick 32nd. For more on that, check out 97.3 ESPN.com. All right, John, a 5 o'clock drive time football segment. I like it.
Thanks, Mike.